深淵を歩め世のはある。シャドウボール。
Hey everyone, it's Mark. This is my recap for Pokémon Horizons episode 34, Going Their Own Ways. This was the 1266th episode of the Pokémon anime and the last episode of 2023. I hope everyone's holidays are going well, and I apologize for this review being a few days behind. I've been busy with friends and family, but enough about that, let's get into the usual breakdown. Liko catches us up with her normal recap. Look at how happy Hatena is in the bottom right corner, I love it so much, and we pick right up with everyone gathered around. Diana says it's her turn to fight now, and remember that she's already made her mind up about leaving the Rising Volt Tacklers. After the opening, we see Freed and Diana having a conversation as Diana packs up her belongings. Freed says the crew is headed towards Paldea, and they agree that they could probably learn something about Terapagos there. It's pretty much their only lead at the minute, and Diana tells Freed to let her off at the next port, and we see that there are some eavesdroppers on this conversation. Liko takes the news of her grandma leaving pretty well, stating that she's always like this. Roy suggests throwing her a goodbye party, and Liko agrees, so they go get started planning it. Yosu, Pokemon trainers! Oh man, there's only been one Nidothing video in the past 10 plus episodes, so I have been waiting for another one of these. Dot is shilling a hat in this video, which you can actually obtain in Scarlet and Violet if you go enter the code that was released alongside the airing of this episode, but anyways, aside from the product placement, this video focuses on the terrestrial phenomenon, and the anime is beginning to focus on this a lot now. I'll talk more about this as the episode goes on, as well as in the discussion video of this review, but for now, we see that after watching this video back, Dot gets a phone call from out of nowhere. Yosu! I love that IONO used Nidothing's greeting too. The supercharged streamer thanks Dot for doing the Terrestrial hat promotion for her. Apparently, IONO didn't want to be seen without her Magnemite hair accessories, and yeah, it is kind of strange seeing her without them. Dot is like, yeah, whatever, at least it made me a little money. IONO immediately changes the subject to be like, hey, when are we gonna collab next? And I have to say that as a content creator myself, it is so fascinating to me watching how shows like this write other content creators. I've definitely had a few conversations like this when someone is just like, alright, so anyways, let's collab. IONO keeps on talking, asking Dot what it's like being a trainer now, and Dot brings up the interesting point that she already knew a lot of this stuff before becoming a trainer herself, and it is kind of fascinating to me that Dot became such a successful content creator when she had absolutely no experience doing the type of stuff she was making content about. Their conversation gets interrupted by Fuecoco making a surprise appearance, causing Dot to freak out and tell Liko and Roy to calm things down. They barge into her room, and IONO is like, oh, I see, your IRL friends want to talk to you. The kids freak out when they realize they're talking to the IONO, and she's like, oh, it's Sprigatito Superfan, I remember you, and IONO asks Liko and Roy to take care of Dot, which causes Dot to get even more flustered as she claims to be the one looking after the other two. IONO keeps on teasing Dot a little bit more, asking her if she's glad she became a trainer. Dot is speechless, which leads IONO to guess what the answer is, and pretty quickly says her goodbyes. Now off the call, Dot continues freaking out and makes it clear to Liko and Roy that parties are not her thing. Well, that scene was incredible, but what happens next is perhaps the most interesting part of the episode. Hamber announces that Master Gibeon is awake, and this crazy piece of technology starts talking to Amethio. They talk about Amethio's battle with Rayquaza from the previous episode, and Gibeon asks if the legendary Pokemon was simply toying with Amethio. Amethio restates that he will capture Rayquaza, and okay, here we go. Gibeon says the path to my paradise, Rockua. Whoa, so Gibeon knows about Rockua? And he continues by saying that Terapagos and Rayquaza are the keys to Rockua, so the explorers must have them. After that, Gibeon fades away and Hamber announces that they're done here. The second they step outside of Gibeon's chamber, Amethio asks Hamber to train him. Hamber is like, well, I already taught you everything, but Amethio restates what he said at the end of the last episode. He needs more power. Hamber understands, and they head straight to the battlefield. Looks like it will be Ceruledge versus Dusknoir, and the match begins with a stalemate between Psycho Cut and Shadow Ball. Dusknoir follows up with Shadow Punch, landing the first hit, and in the process activating Ceruledge's Weak Armor ability, raising its speed. Weak Armor is also supposed to lower your defenses, but we never really see that. Anyways, Dusknoir catches Ceruledge before firing a close-range Shadow Ball, and Amethio has Ceruledge try and mitigate the damage by falling right into a Phantom Force. Hamber isn't going to let that happen though, and has Dusknoir reach into the Spectral Portal, grab Ceruledge out of there, yank it back into the air, and fire a Shadow Ball, which Ceruledge impressively cuts right through this time. Hamber asks if Amethio is ready to quit yet, but the two continue battling, with their Pokemon exchanging a flurry of attacks, and this has pretty quickly become the best battle in all of Pokemon Horizons thus far. It was a pretty low bar though, if I'm being honest. Hamber calls for the final blow with a Shadow Punch, but Amethio counters, telling Ceruledge to grab the Shadow Punch. The strategy works, as Dusknoir can't really do anything with Ceruledge clinging onto its arm like that. Hamber is taken aback by this, surprised that Amethio would battle this way. Dusknoir eventually throws Ceruledge off, but Amethio uses that momentum to go straight into another Phantom Force, and this time it works, with Ceruledge landing a hit for massive damage. Dusknoir stands back up as Hamber expresses his surprise at Amethio's tactics, to which Amethio just asks if he's mocking him. Hamber says no, he's actually impressed, and this proves that Amethio's desire for strength is real. With that said, Hamber decides to kick things up a notch, and whoa boy, here we go, Hamber's got a Terra Orb. He terastallizes his Dusknoir, did not see that coming, and Hamber looks pretty excited to finally be showing off his true strength. They launch a Terra-boosted Shadow Ball Amethio's way, and he has Ceruledge charge right at it with a Bitter Blade. Turns out this was just a diversion, as Hamber has Dusknoir follow up with the Terra-boosted Shadow Punch, and yeah, that's gonna hurt. Ceruledge goes crashing into the wall, and it's knocked out. In the most Hamber way possible, this butler calls the battle to a close. Amethio immediately asks for a rematch, but we'll catch up with these guys later. For now, it's time to turn our attention back to the Brave Olivine, where we see Diana talking to herself about this being her last night on the airship. When she walks inside, she opens up the door to reveal a surprise party. Everyone's all fired up, they even made curry. I hope they made it with their heart. And Fuecoco starts leading all the Pokemon in a song, which even Arcanine is getting in on, as Diana is overwhelmed by all of this. She says the most grandma thing possible by saying that she better go fetch her best tea leaves to celebrate, and we see a smash cut of everyone going to town on the food and drink, kind of like most of us did at our holiday parties. Ligo is impressed with Diana's tea, so then this big idiot is like, oh, let me try some, only for Sinistea to jump right in Freed's way. And he ends up drinking it again. Don't worry though, this big idiot is quick to say, oh Freed, can't you tell them apart, before absolutely downing a cup of Polteageist's finest. I know this is like quintessential kids show humor, but I still love the slapstick comedy as Murdoch falls out of his chair. Molly is like, he didn't drink that much, he'll be fine. And now we know the party has really started now that the first person is passed out. With that out of the way, Dot pops up and announces it's time for the main event, as Ligo explains that Dot put together a video of all their memories with Diana. They start at the castle from back in, hold on, that is not the castle Diana was at before, and Dot's just like, oh yeah, we didn't have any pictures of it, so I just used some royalty-free image I found online. Anyways, moving on, the story continues with Diana and the Rising Voltaclers escaping, complete with explosions for some reason. Roy really seemed to like that though. And then they made curry together with explosions, and then they found Tepin's antique shop with explosions. To which Lello exclaims, what wild antics, because it's an antique shop. Wow, I'm surprised that horrible pun even made the translation into English too. Back to the video, which is now focusing on Liko and Roy's training with Diana from the previous episode. Roy is confused why the training didn't explode, and Liko's like, well, ideally it wouldn't explode, and Freed points out that none of the other stuff should have exploded either, although I'm sure Sango would have something to say about that. The video ends after that with everyone thanking Diana, and of course she loved this tribute. It was a really nice gesture, even with all the explosions. We're back to the Explorers HQ for the next scene as Hamber comments on the progress Amethio has made, but our determined young villain says that he's nowhere near strong enough. He states that his goal is to defeat Rayquaza, and Hamber responds by giving him a Terra Orb? Whoa, did not see that coming, but Amethio accepts it, claiming that he will gain the power needed to rival Rayquaza. We see a familiar Beheeyem observing this interaction, and it turns out that Spinel and Agate are spying on Amethio, but they're not too concerned about his progress, claiming that they have the information they need, and they will be the ones to seize the Black Rayquaza. The episode finishes back aboard the Brave Olivine, and we see Liko going over to help her grandma do the dishes. Diana says she barely recognizes Liko, and this triggers a memory sequence as Liko recalls all the times her grandma's advice helped her on her journey. Diana approves of all of this, and she goes out and gives Liko her own adventure log. Liko responds in kind by giving her a bracelet she made, and she claims that a friend from school taught her how to make them. I tried looking it up to find a scene of Anne making bracelets, but I couldn't find anything. Oh well, that's not super important, so let's jump ahead to the next day when Diana gets dropped off at the nearest port like she requested. With her bracelet around her wrist, Diana is ready to get to work, and she sets off to who knows where in order to investigate what the explorers are up to and why they're targeting Liko. Back aboard the airship, we get a super corny scene with every member of the Rising Voltaclers together restating their goal. It was one of those scenes where every character talks one line at a time and it's like so unnaturally perfect, but whatever, because the Rising Voltaclers theme was playing in the background and made this feel epic. As our heroes set their sights on Paldea as they continue their quest to find Lucius's 6 heroes, reclaim Terapagos' true power, and find their way to Rakawa. Now that was my longest recap in a while. This episode really had a lot going on. That makes it a little tricky for me to figure out how to frame this discussion and review section, so I'll start by going to some of my biggest takeaways from this episode. I'm surprised IONO returned. I had previously mentioned that it would not surprise me if IONO only appeared during her initial storyline in Horizons, but I guess she's become somewhat of a recurring character. IONO being friends with Dot is fascinating, and like I mentioned earlier, it's funny to me seeing how content creators are written on a show like this, but there definitely is a real sense of community between fellow content creators, so it makes sense that these two would be friends. I wonder if IONO's appearance here will open things up for more Paldean gym leaders to appear. I mean, we know neither Liko nor Roy are competing in the gym challenge, but IONO did challenge Dot to a battle, so who knows what might happen. Generally, I think Horizons has done a few things almost directly in response to some of the flaws people pointed out in Journeys, and I know a lot of people were disappointed that we didn't get to see more Galar gym leaders, so I have a feeling the anime is going to shoehorn in more Paldean gym leaders one way or another. Moving on from that, let's talk about the Explorers. I mentioned in my recap that this may have been the most interesting part of the episode to me. Specifically, I was talking about Amethio's meeting with Master Gibeon, and this caught my attention the most because of how little we know about Gibeon so far. I can't really speculate much since I have almost nothing to go off, but it does seem likely to me that Gibeon must be as old as Lucius. That would explain how he knows about Terapagos and Rakawa, as well as how the Explorers have continued on in the modern day, even though historically they were Lucius's friends. And this is something I've pointed out constantly whenever I'm analyzing Amethio's character, but he is quickly becoming one of my favorite villains in the history of the Pokemon anime because he's being presented in so many non-villainous ways. Aside from some comedic Team Rocket training episodes, when have we seen a villain put in so much work to get better without doing anything underhanded? I really feel like we should be rooting for Amethio. He's a strong-willed underdog who wants to work hard and achieve his goals alongside his partners, yet he's the bad guy? One of my favorite parts about Horizons is its layered storytelling, and a perfect example of that is while Amethio is being presented as a somewhat sympathetic villain, we get the juxtaposition of the more sinister villains when we see Spinel and Agate spying on him. It's interesting that the Explorers aren't all just working together, but instead they seem to have formed their own cliques. Amethio has Zerk and Onya, while Spinel is a tag team with Agate. How exactly do you pronounce her name again? Whatever, we'll figure it out eventually, and it's kind of a lazy assumption to assume that Onyx and Sango are working together, but I suppose it is possible. Hamber isn't really getting directly involved himself, but seeing him in action was a real treat. He's going to be a problem when the Rising Voltaglers have to face him one day. His Dusknoir definitely seems more powerful than Freed's Charizard. At some point I have to give my rating for the episode, and initially I had a 6.5 written down, but after going over everything again, I think I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10 rating. There were so many funny moments and so many serious moments, both of which made me excited to keep on watching, which is really what the purpose of this episode was, an end of the year reset to get the plot back on track ahead of the new year. In retrospect, I never touched on Diana's departure at all, so let me comment on that quickly. I always thought it was a foregone conclusion that she would separate from the Rising Voltaglers eventually. That much was obvious to me when she wasn't pictured with them in the opening. She was never an official member of the crew. I'm not sure what we'll see here next, but I can imagine the moment in my head already when Liko is in a pinch when suddenly an Arcanine comes flying in out of nowhere to save the day. That will be amazing. And with the Rising Voltaglers saying goodbye to Diana for now, they set their sights on Paldea. Circling back to something I mentioned during the Neothing segment of this episode was that Horizon seems to be putting more of an emphasis on the terrestrialization right now. We just saw Amethio get his very own Terra Orb, and I doubt he's the only trainer getting one of those in the near future. I can totally see this Paldea arc introducing Terra Orbs for one or more of our heroes. Surely Liko and Roy are shoo-ins to get their own Terra Orbs eventually, but what about any of the others? It doesn't look like any of that is going to happen in the next episode though, which is going to air on Friday, January 12th by the way, so don't expect a new episode in the coming days. I am looking forward to this one though. I want to see more world building and establishing how the Rising Voltaglers operate, and one important piece of that puzzle is how they make their money. They're going to take a job in the next episode, and we're also going to find out Cap's Achilles heel, which looks like it has something to do with sneezing. Well, we may not have a new episode of Horizons coming soon. That does give me the time to actually finish my rendition of the Rising Voltaglers rap, which I am very excited to finalize and share with you all. In the meantime, I will be putting out my yearly tradition of the Best of Elite Trainer mark as 2023 comes to an end, and over in my Discord server, I will be posting a Discord exclusive video ranking every single video game I played this past year. The link to join my server is down in the description, but I've talked enough for one video. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.